You joined the Illinois National Guard, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
What year was that?
I enlisted in 2006. I was still in high school when I enlisted.
Were you a senior or junior?
I was a senior.
Senior.
Yeah.
Um, 2006. What was your motivation for joining the Guard?
Well, the military, I was intending to join. I wanted to be a pilot, wanted to be a fighter pilot actually,
Mhm.
but my vision wasn't good enough. So I kind of was giving up on the whole thing, and then a bunch of recruiters came to the school, and I talked to the Marine Corps, talked to the Army, talked to the National Guard. I never was really interested in the Navy or the Coast Guard,
Yeah.
but the National Guard recruiter is the one who first said something about a $20,000 sign-on bonus.
Mhm.
And I was thinking, man, I could buy a really nice car with $20,000,
Yeah.
and I guess I liked him too. He was just a little bit nicer than the active duty guy. I also kind of, for a little bit, thought that I might go to college and do ROTC and then become an officer or something.
Yeah.
Uh, so the National Guard was like, oh, well, if I wanted to do that, I could do that. Whereas if I just went straight active duty, there would be no time to do that.
Right. Yeah. Um, so you joined up initially then, 2006, things are pretty hot in Iraq. I think in 2006, we're not hearing so much about Afghanistan. Afghanistan kind of, falls into the background. Iraq, I think in 2006 is what we're hearing about most. Um, you mentioned the money. And so what were you, 18 at the time, something like 17 or 18?
17. Yeah.
Yeah, so 17. So, I mean, that's going to be attractive. I think a lot of people join the military, they're not really having big thoughts. They're thinking about, here's my ticket to college. I don't have anything else to do, something like that.
I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like, people kept saying, what do you want to be? What do you want to do? And I was like, man, I don't know. But, I felt like specifically I chose infantry because I wanted to push myself physically. And I felt like I was kind of more of a nerdy type high school kid. So I was picking something that was more physical and aggressive.
Uh,
And, I just didn't want to be I don't know what the right, there's only bad words for the things I want to say, but
well, and I wrote something, or I read something you wrote where I think a recruiter said, after he saw your scores on the entrance test for the military, you did pretty well. And he asked you, and I'll give the family version, do you want to sit behind a desk or do you want to blow stuff up? And your
yeah.
response was, I want to blow stuff up, which also sounds like, 17-year-old, something like a 17-year-old guy would say, especially if maybe you have a feeling like I've been a little nerdy and now it's time to, show some stuff on the other side. When you had that thought that you would prefer to blow stuff up, were you thinking Iraq and or Afghanistan? I mean, because we've got these two conflicts going at that time. Was that really in your mind at that time, or were those kind of distant abstractions that you weren't really paying attention to at the time?
I was very aware that it was likely I would get deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan. I figured it would be Iraq, most likely. Uh, what I did not take into account when they asked me if I wanted to blow stuff up was that it would be people. It would be, and that I might get blown up. You know,
Mhm.
17-year-old me was not thinking that far ahead, but I was thinking, oh, I'll wind up going to fight. But it just, I don't think the reality
Mhm.
of combat itself really, you don't feel it till you're there, till you see it.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that. So when you hear blowing stuff up, then you're thinking of kind of, watching the Legos tower crash, but on a huge scale. Sort of the
Yeah,
thrill that a 5-year-old has of watching the Lego tower come down. Same thing, just on a bigger scale.
yeah. I mean, even like in training, we'd set up a claymore or something like that. Like it's really cool, or shoot an AT-4, a rocket launcher. It's super fun. But you don't think about what that was made for, like what its real purpose is. Like everybody that goes out and practice, they like get their AR out and they go shoot. for fun here. But that's really not what the purpose of that weapon is,
So let me jump ahead a little bit then. I mean, when did it become clear in your mind? I mean, you go into the military, and so you know in some abstract way, and you're thinking about, I'll be deployed to Iraq, but still, you kind of just indicated you hadn't really connected that to killing and possibly killing and possibly being killed, right?
Yeah.
Which of course is what happens in combat. When did that when did that become clear in your mind that, oh wow, okay, I'm actually involved in something now that actually does involve what combat involves? When did that really become clear to you that that's the world you had entered?
I think I think it came in little tiny waves until I had full awakening, full realization. But I think, the first time was in basic training / infantry school. You do them all together. You do OSIT. Uh, I think all of my drill sergeants had all been wounded, or maybe all but one. So that was a little bit of a realization. And then the time that really sticks out in my mind is when we landed in Bagram coming into country. They put us on these buses and sent us away from everybody else. For whatever reason, they keep all the guys that are going off to the front. Well, I don't even call it the front, like the border of Pakistan.
Mm.
You're going to the middle of nowhere, like they moved you off away from everybody else where there was like a Dairy Queen and stuff. And I was on this bus with guys and they asked me, they said, "Oh, hey, where are you going?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm going to Kunar province." And they were like, "Yeah, we just came from Kunar province." And I'm like, "Oh, what was it like?" And he's like, he's joking here. He's joking, but just he says, make sure when you pack your oh shit bag, you put a magazine for your 9mm pistol with just one bullet in it. That's what he said. And that made me scared. Like that was like the first time I was like, oh shit, they really do that, like obviously you'd pack more and just maybe save one for yourself. But
Yeah.
uh
Wow.
yeah, I just couldn't believe it. And then I did not know when I had gotten ordered to go to Kunar how bad Kunar was. I didn't know about oh man, was that Navy SEAL, the team that gets overrun and stuff like that happened out by where I was at. I think Pat Tillman was killed out by where I was at. The Marine that got the Medal of Honor was right by where I was at. I did not realize how bad of an area that was until I got in country.
Until you were on the way. You said your drill instructors had combat experience. I'm assuming Iraq, Afghanistan. Um, how much did they bring that up as part of training?
A lot, all the time. Really, what they're doing more is trying to weed people out who would crumble,
Mm.
if they were, put in an intense situation, a life or death situation. I think they just don't want to let anybody get there. I do think that their primary goal was to make sure that anyone they put through, they would be okay with being next to if they were on the front. Like they did not want to put people through. A lot of guys that I was in my platoon initially did not pass. I mean, actually, I think a really high attrition rate, for just being a basic, infantryman. But some guys just are probably would be better off doing something else.
Yeah. Yeah, you go into the Guard, and I think you wrote in something I read that you were attracted to the idea that a lot of people are attracted to in the Guard, that you're in the military but not really, and you're getting a nice chunk, you're getting a nice respectable chunk of change for kind of being in the military. But as we know, in this era, 2006 and around that era, to be in the Guard really is to be deployed. I mean, for a lot of folks in the Guard. When was it that you found out that this wasn't going to be a weekend warrior thing, but that you were really going to be full-time, basically full-time Army for a long deployment?
Yeah, that was fun for me because I graduated in October of 2007, and
From
I
high
got
school?
to from infantry school.
Infantry school. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I graduated in May of 07. And
Okay.
then my birthday, I turned 18 in June. And I think I left for basic like that week. Like the week I turned 18, I was on a plane
Wow.
flying to Georgia.
Yeah.
And then yeah, and then I graduate in October. You like 30 days later, I'm supposed to report to my unit. And when I reported, for my first drill, they got us all together and handed us orders to Afghanistan. So that was my hello, welcome to the unit. Here's your
Wow.
Title 10 orders to active duty. Like,
Wow. That's amazing. Now you went in when you were 17, so I think that requires parents' permission, right?
Yep, it did. Yep.
So, I mean, what we've heard a little bit about what was in your mind. What was in your parents' mind to sign the paper?
They did not want me to do it. That's for sure. They were going to support me no matter what I wanted to do. And I think I made it pretty clear that I was going to enlist at some point. And I think I used the argument that if you signed up, if you enlisted in high school at 17, they would you could start building points for rank, and you also would get paid for a drill weekend each month. And then it would start counting your contract down. So I'm like, hey, I get out a year earlier if, I sign up now and I'm just in high school, really. I can't get deployed, nothing like that. And
Wow.
I think they knew I was gonna do it when I graduated, and they didn't want me to resent them probably.
Um, when did you first arrive in country then in Afghanistan?
Okay, so when I was given the orders, I still wound up having like 6 months of drill, I think. So,
Okay.
they give you a advance notice. They don't just say like, here's your orders, you're getting on a boat tomorrow. Like,
Yeah.
I think it was like 6 months. And then what they did was they packed it all together where, you normally do like a 2 or 3 week yearly exercise. They did that so that it went back to back with pre-deployment training from when we were immediately going to be called to active duty. So it was like 3 weeks. We went to, actually, what's funny is I'm from Illinois, that I was in the Illinois Guard, but now I live down in, Arkansas, and Fort Chaffee is where I went for that. It was 2 weeks there and then a week at Fort Gruber in Oklahoma to do the heavy weapons over there. I did the Mark 19 range, the 50 cal range, like all the big weapons range. It was fun. It was a good time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then right after that, we went home for like a week, and then to say goodbye to everybody. And then we got on buses and went to Fort Benning, Georgia. We did, man, I think we finished in early October. I either got in country at the middle or end of October or the first week of November. I think it was end of October. I think it was.
So I want to come back and ask you about that, getting into Afghanistan in October. What was you were infantry, but what was your specific job? Did you have a particular job in the
Well,
infantry?
I mean, technically I was a rifleman, like I I was not the I was not the squad automatic weapon guy or anything like that, but it turned out for what we were assigned to do, there was not a lot of dismounted patrolling going on. I mean, we were mounted almost entirely the whole time. So I wound up, I would say 65 or 70% as a gunner, and then 35% as a driver or guarding an OP.
An outpost.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
6 months. So now you know you're going to Afghanistan, and time is counting down. I'm interested in hearing about kind of the trajectory of your psychological state when you begin your 6 months of preparation. 6 months is a long time. So I don't know, maybe the war will be over by then or something like that. I don't know if that thought goes through your mind. But at the beginning, but then you're getting closer and closer and closer. And I'm interested in hearing about what you remember about your own state of mind. Was it something you were looking forward to? Was it something that was causing anxiety? Was it a combination of both? What was your own state of mind?
So this likens back to my senior drill sergeant. I remember him just beating into our heads that if we didn't, they all had CIBs, obviously, or combat infantryman badges. They all had one because they'd all been wounded in combat.
Wow.
And they just constantly were like touching it and being like, if you don't get this, if you don't wind up with one of these, we wasted our time here and you're a waste of space. Like
Mm.
you have to get one of these. If you don't get one, you're useless or you're a piece of shit. I mean, it was pretty black and white like that. So I felt like I needed to get one. Like I had to go see combat, or if I didn't, then I was a waste of time. I wasted the government's time. I wasted the money. I wasted everything. So
Wow.
I wanted to go. You know, I think a lot of us wanted to go and do something and help. There's a lot of other guys over there. And right after I got handed those orders, I grew up in a 2,000 person farm town, very small community, and only one other guy had enlisted in the army the year prior from me, and he was deployed to Iraq, to Samara, I believe, and he was killed in December of 2007. So he got killed right after I got handed orders.
Wow.
And that was pretty sad.
That's Philip.
Yeah, Philip Panir. He was killed in action in Iraq. Yeah.
Did that sometimes, he's Iraq, you're Afghanistan, but these things kind of gel together in people's minds, sometimes. What happened to Philip? Did that kind of make you, I don't know how to put it, make you more committed to going? Like, because there's that sense of, okay, they got him, so I'm gonna, in a way, kind of pick up his torch and fight back because of what happened to him. But did something like that go through your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wanted to go help. If I had graduated sooner, if I had been out earlier, I probably would have tried to tack on to his deployment or something, just to be with somebody from my hometown. But there was not going to happen. They were already in pre-spin up. I think he'd only been there a couple months or a month, I think.
What was your very first impression of Afghanistan? The door on the plane opens and you take in the air of Afghanistan for the first time. Your eyes see something in Afghanistan for the first time. What's your first impression of this place?
I feel like you almost couldn't have said it better. The back of the C-130 came down, and the very first thing that I noticed was the air. It smelled like human fecal matter everywhere. Like, and I'm not joking. I'm not saying that because I have any opinion. I don't have any issue with anybody, but it just smelled like shit. Like the whole, and it was overwhelming. And that probably was burning the feces or something on the base, all the waste. So yeah, it just smelled terrible. And that stuck with me for it took a couple days just to get used to that smell.
Yeah. Well, that's Vietnam vets say the same thing, actually, a lot. You arrived in October, and something that you mentioned in what I read that you wrote is you refer to kind of the spring fighting season, kind of this idea in Afghanistan that it's springtime, therefore it's time to fight somebody. It's going to be the Russians, it's going to be the Americans, it's going to be one another, but it's springtime, time to fight. But you actually show up several months before spring, and winter is descending.
Yep.
So what are you doing in the fall and the winter? What are your first months like in Afghanistan? What kind of work are you doing?
So yeah, I guess, well, first of all, I should just overview. My platoon was broken off from our company, which was broken off from our battalion. And each platoon was assigned to a provincial reconstruction team, which is just like a bunch of Navy guys, or well, it's not a bunch. It's like a handful of Navy guys, some State Department workers. I don't know exactly what they were doing, but our job was supposed to be to keep them safe. So they needed to go out and look at things or make deals to have schools built or whatever, in the middle of nowhere. And they needed a personal security detail. So that's what we were tasked to do, to make sure that, this Navy commander and these Navy engineers and stuff like that didn't get killed, while they were trying to do their job. And sometimes we were escorting random like I had a bunch of British generals in my truck one time, and
And you're
others
driving.
Australians too.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're working initially on with those who are on the nation building side, right?
Yeah,
There's this idea of take it to the Taliban, defeat them, but build nation build at the same time. I've got a photo of you know bringing school supplies, I guess, out to an area. So now just stepping back and looking at your whole deployment to Afghanistan, and how long were you in country?
I think 10 months, I think.
So you're there 10 months. Um, Veterans I've talked to who are in Iraq and Afghanistan say that, comparatively, Iraq seemed like it was a highly advanced society, Afghanistan, not so much. I mean, one of the really striking photos I have of you is looks like an armored personnel carrier going down this road, and you have these sort of shacks, along the side of the road.
Yeah.
It looks incredibly rudimentary. Um, you start off with the nation building side of things. You're protecting those who are doing the nation building. Um, After 10 months of being in country, how confident were you that Afghanistan ever really could be a functional society in the way that we think of it? And, not like Canada, I don't think anybody would say that, but a somewhat functional society where you've got predictable plumbing, predictable electricity, a government that you can basically trust, and stuff like that. How confident were you after 10 months that the nation building actually could work?
Well, based on my opinion while we were there, which of course didn't matter that much. I was an E4, I was a specialist, so
Yeah.
my opinion didn't count for much. But my opinion was we were doing a shit job. Like it really seemed like they were trying. It seemed like they were just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what could stick, especially money, a lot of money. Throw that around, see what happens.
Yeah.
But that was never going to work. And, my suggestion, of course, is, this didn't go anywhere, but when we were having briefings or meetings, is like, we should be sending the interpreters that were from there that we were using, we should send them back here for like 2 years of college,
Mm.
and let them learn. And then they could come back and teach, and they would get exposed to all this and see all these good ideas and all those things. And then we would have had to stay there, in my personal opinion, for 40 years and protect these teachers and the classes with the children, so that those kids, the first wave of them, would be adults with adult children. You'd have two generations that would have grown up in this protected environment. It would have been so expensive and insane, but that's the only way that would ever work. I mean, the
Yeah.
way that we were doing it, that was never gonna work. I mean,
One of the pictures that I saw of yours is you've got these kids who are carrying army sacks. I guess they're helping carry stuff. Another image, you've got guys coming up, is it to Outpost Bull Run, bringing supplies.
yeah,
And there's another picture where you've got Afghan kids, with water bottles. As you bring to your mind's eye these Afghan kids who are around, you bring to your mind's eye these Afghans who are coming up to the outposts, supplying you, presumably being paid, right? Um, to what extent, after a while, did you feel that you could trust these folks? And let me set that up. I mean, you talk to Vietnam vets. A story I've heard a few times is, there was this Vietnamese barber on the base. He was a great guy. He was cutting our hair. He had sharp instruments right next to our faces and our throats. Seemed like a great guy, no problem. Ends up that he was the barber on base by day, Viet Cong by night, and he's helping the other side. And you get to this place where it doesn't matter how much they smile at you, you feel like you can't trust any of them. Does
yeah,
that resonate at all with your experience? Did you feel like, you could trust the Afghan civilians that, these guys are bringing us supplies, which is great. Are they also scoping the thing out and bringing news back to the Taliban? You know what I'm saying? Was that
yeah.
was that kind of, how does that resonate with your experience?
Well, I well, I have a specific story about that that's very interesting, but
Yeah.
I will say though, when I got there, a lot of guys in my unit, there are a lot of people just in general, who were just like, you can't trust any of these people, it's only us. And, I felt like they kind of mistreated some of like our Afghan army counterparts and stuff like that. So, I didn't like that. I tried to eat with them frequently. I would go sit on the, ground with them and eat together. You can all eat like out of plates by hand, it's not formal. You don't use silverware.
Right.
And, I thought it was important. I was like, this is very important, And I also thought, like, man, if these guys are going to turn on someone and shoot somebody, it's not going to be me. Like, they're going to shoot that asshole over there first. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, so
so
it was partly international outreach,
yeah.
intercultural outreach, partly self-preservation.
I
Sort of.
mean, it seems like a natural animalistic behavior, right? Like, I'm not trying to make more enemies. I already have enemies here. I don't need more. Like,
Yeah. You said you had a particular story
yeah.
related to the question of trust. If you're willing to share it, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I will. Yeah. So up on OP Bull Run, we had our own interpreter. So on OP Bull Run, you'd have like 3 Americans and then like 6 Afghan army, and then
Wow.
an interpreter who lived up there, and his name was Hamza. Hamza, I guess he'd been the interpreter up on Bull Run for several years. He'd been there a while, and we worked with him. He was fine. He was real goofy. I mean, real funny type guy. Like, he would just be holding like super poisonous scorpions and like calling himself the Scorpion King and stuff. It was crazy. But a little bit later, I saw a video on YouTube, like a year and a half after I got home. I saw a video on YouTube and I'm like, oh, that's OP Bull Run or whatever. So I wrote a comment in there, and a guy responds and he said, hey, we were the people that ripped you out, that were there right after you. And I was like, oh man, hey, what happened to whatever happened to Hamza? And they said, oh, it turns out he was making maps and drawings of the bases and marking times when troops were coming and going. So he's not here anymore, or he's not there when we left.
There's that classic problem, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So now you were up on Bull Run, all right? So the first part of your deployment, you're working with, you're protecting the hearts and minds folks, the building the country folks.
I'll stop you real quick because it's not broken up like you think it is. The way that we had 3 squads in the platoon, so yeah, we were short man. I think there were only 33 of us total in this platoon. So like it's not a full strength platoon. And they broke us into 3 squads, and then we took turns. So one squad's job was to guard OP Bull Run. One squad was on missions, usually with the support of the second squad. Not every mission required both, but sometimes you would need both.
I see.
And then 3 or 4 guys at any given time would be left on base for guard, like just as extra muscle, to make sure if something happened that we had some more guys.
Is that Camp Wright?
At Camp Wright, yeah.
At Camp
And
Wright.
Camp Wright had an ODA, a special forces element that was there. I'm told, I don't know this, I never saw it with my own eyes, but apparently the Russians built this base back in the day, and apparently it's got underground like section of it that was in the ODA section. And I saw some dudes who I'm pretty sure were spook guys, CIA type guys, something. They also were, I don't think I get trouble for any of this, but they were also bringing dudes in black bags frequently, like white truck, dude in the back seat with a black bag over his head. Random Black Hawk comes in, dude doesn't come back. Like, I never saw him come back. They were bagging in type. You gotta remember, this is in 08, 09. They were looking for Bin Laden, and turns out that I think that's the last area that he was spotted in, was like up in there. So I think they were tagging a lot of people trying to find him. And yeah, I mean, that was on the base, and then there were 2 155 howitzers, so 2 gun teams were on the base, and then a route clearance team. So
going out looking for IDs, things like that.
Yeah, generally speaking, generally they would route clear for us, so they would go out, try and if there were any IDs, hopefully detonate them before we came through. That was the plan, and they did hit some. They definitely found some.
Yeah. So you're kind of rotating then. Sometimes you're doing guard duty for the nation builder folks. Sometimes you're up on, you're up at the outposts. Sometimes you're on base. Um, we just mentioned IEDs. If I have it right, reading what you wrote, one of the vehicles you were in was hit by an IED. Is that right? Or
No, I never hit an IED. Uh, our company, when they broke us off, they split us into two platoons, and they sent one platoon to Nangarhar right beside us, right beside Kunar. And they hit an IED in June of
right, yeah.
they hit an IED in June '09. Nobody died, but I think the gunner lost both his legs, and the two guys in the front seat were really hurt bad. And then the two guys in the back seat, hearing damage, concussion damage, the whole nine.
That's right. Yeah, it was a different group. Um, when did you yourself experience combat for the first time?
I think I'd been at Camp Wright for like 10 days, something like that. So we were still doing, when you get in country, you do right seat, left seat rides. The old unit that's there leaves some of their guys behind to kind of like hand the torch off to the new guys that are coming in. And we went to go do a nation building mission. We went to go do a school opening in the Pesh Valley. Turns out I didn't know this at the time, but it's right at the base of Korengal Valley in the Pesh Valley, which turns out that place is pretty bad. And so we set up there to do this school opening, and a sniper took a shot at the school opening, I believe. I heard it, and I'm in the turret. I was gunning for this mission, and I heard it, and I radioed sniper, and I got told that it was not a sniper, to calm down. It's an ANA Afghan or accidental discharge. It was an accidental discharge from a weapon.
From an Afghanistan National Army guy?
Yeah, and that an Afghan National Army guy accidentally discharged his weapon. That's what I was told. And just to calm down. And I leaned down to my buddy Eller in the driver's seat, and I said, "Hey man, get ready, because that was not an ANA accidental discharge. That came from the mountain. I'm almost 100% certain." And he's like, "All right." And I got way down in the turret. Well, like 2 minutes later, another shot goes off, hits the building right above the Navy commander, like whack, smacks it. The whole crowd just starts running every direction. I mean, it was like maybe 30 or 40 villagers, it wasn't, but like they're sprinting. I think we had the governor for Kunar province there with us. So he's loading up and getting his stuff to try and dip out of there. And on the way out, as we're leaving this village, we got ambushed. So that was the start to an ambush.
And this was 10 days in country about?
Yeah, I think so. I think it'd been maybe a week and a half at most. We were the first, my squad was the first one to hit something.
How did this ambush unfold? So you weren't hit by an IED. So I mean, I would assume step one would be an IED goes off, and then things go from there. What happened? How did it unfold for you guys?
So it turns out they did not frequently initiate ambushes there with IEDs. A lot of times it was more like RPG fire, or it might be like indirect fire.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes, like in this particular case, it was just PKMs. It was all machine guns and rifles. So yeah, I mean, it was quite a bit of it. Actually in that fight, so the guys before us, they would always put their AT-4 right over their shoulder in the turret. So I did it too. I did exactly what the guy before me was doing. And we got in that gunfight, and I was on a Mark 19 automatic grenade launcher. And middle of that fight, I remember just these snaps and bright, like almost bright lights in my face, and I could hear metal, like tinging on metal, and I dropped down, because I was like, oh shit. I got up, we finished the fight, but we were almost black on ammo. So we stopped at one of the bases in the valley. And when my buddy was handing me cans of ammo to put down into the truck through the turret, he was like, holy shit, dude, look. And I turned and looked over my shoulder, and it hit my rocket, like one of the PKM rounds. I mean, it had to go like right by it. And that bright that I saw, I think it was a tracer round that went past and then hit the rocket launcher, splayed it open. The bullet was sticking out the back side of the casing, the tube, still stuck in there. It was quite the sight to see. And also, that's the first time I almost got killed for sure.
Wow. How long did that whole firefight go? If some guys say they seem to go forever. Some guys say, it's like time kind of freezes and you don't know what's going on. What do you think?
I think that one was that initial ambush was only maybe 30 minutes or something. We did in my personal opinion, we did an absolutely fantastic job of calling in fire support immediately. Like once we took contact, there was no like sending a test round. We already had pre-designated target like markers for the artillery, so you could just call for immediate suppression on EA Huskies was the one for the base of the Korengal. So you could just call for immediate suppression, troops in contact, and they would just start firing. Like you didn't need to say anything else. They would start shooting.
You didn't need to get them coordinates. They've already got those.
And they would also pre-align their weapons, the guns. They would already have them trained into the general region where they think contact might happen. So it does not take them long. I mean, I think maybe we were in contact for 6-7 minutes before the 155 artillery starts hitting. I mean, it starts landing and they're really good at their jobs. So, you start walking it around in a Z pattern up along that ridge line, I think maybe 30 minutes before they decided they didn't want to fight anymore. And
did you ever see what you were shooting at? I mean, you can see the tracers coming, but apart from that, did you ever actually see the enemy during this time?
Not in that fight. No, that fight was probably, man, I want to say 500-600 meters. Like it was far. Like it was really, really far.
Now, you had taken some sniper fire already, so were you already pretty keyed up by the time this ambush hit?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was on edge. I mean, that was it. It's so quick. It happened so fast, like so soon to being there that it was like, okay, this gonna happen. But I also heard though that like the guys that were at in Korengal at the cop out there, that like they land under fire. So like everyone's first exposure to fire is with their bags coming in every single time. So it wasn't like that, but it still seemed pretty quick, happened pretty fast. And that day, I guess I should continue because we had quite a few objectives that day. And so the reason we were rearming in the valley was because we still had more missions to do. So we went to go do more missions. And on the way back, again, we got ambushed again. Except this time, the Navy commander and my squad leader and I think 4 other guys, a couple engineers and maybe a couple more of our infantry guys, they all walked across 2 fields to a bridge that was supposed to be being built. That suit was right in view of Huskies, like right in view of where we just got ambushed. And we left the trucks on the road because it had just rained. So the ground was real soft and they walk all the way out there. Well, as soon as they got to that bridge, all hell broke loose again. I mean, tracers, machine gun fire. This time I think indirect mortars were coming in at them, and they're just in the total open. I mean, completely in the open. And I remember Sergeant Crowley or something radioing like, "Get the fucking trucks down here right now," and nobody was going. I think that it was either the lieutenant or our platoon sergeant was like, "We're gonna get the truck stuck, and then we're gonna have an even bigger shit show." But me and Eller and Minder and Shepperson, we were in our trucks and we all were like, "No, we're going down there." So we went down there, we drove. It was, if it wasn't so intense, it was super cool because I'm like, we're following this rut line going in trying to keep the trucks in line. And then we get down there, they jump in, you know, we're stacked on top of each other, just trying to get them into a truck so we can get back to more cover. And then on the way back, I'm got one hand on like my, I think I had a 240 side mounted as an eagle mount. So I had two weapons mounted, and I'm shooting, I'm just like spraying at air with this hand while I'm looking backwards, trying to tell him where to turn his wheel to stay in the rut so we don't go off and get stuck, you know. And we did. They both backed perfectly out. So we did not get stuck, luckily, and everybody got out without being injured somehow. It was crazy. And then we you know, stabilized up there. I don't think we got any air support for that. It was just 120s, I think 120 millimeter mortars and 155s. We stayed that time. We did not leave until we were fairly certain that we had destroyed whatever was attacking us.
Thanks.
That became the new doctrine too. The new doctrine was we did not break contact anymore. Like, we stayed until they broke contact, till they were done, which was a good decision.
And it was the fire support that you think was the main thing that caused them to break contact?
Oh, sir, it's got to be. Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to, if you see it, like, I would not want to be on the receiving end of that shit. No way. No way.
Well, that gets us back to where we were at the beginning. The recruiter asking you, do you want to sit at a desk or blow stuff up? And now you're seeing the real thing. I want to ask, what happens to a person when you're actually in a combat situation, especially that first, was it the first ambush that the bullet goes right by your head?
Yeah, that was the first ambush.
Which I imagine, however keyed up you are, that probably deepens that a little bit more or adds some new element to whatever's going through your mind. And then you got the second ambush. Sometimes guys say, you know, like the question would be, you know, what were you thinking? And usually what combat vets say is you're not thinking anything. Just adrenaline kicks in, training kicks in, and that's it.
Yeah, I don't recall thinking about anything. There was a lot of yelling. I mean, a lot of yelling, a lot of attempt to communicate from the gunners. So we had, I think usually it'd be like 4 trucks. So you got 4 gunners who are really doing a majority of the shooting, you know? And so we're trying to communicate with each other about where we're seeing this come from so that we can, you know, try and destroy the target. Specifically trying to get the Mark 19 on to whatever it is usually, you know, that's going to be your most effective weapon. Yeah, I don't recall thinking a whole lot. I recall my weapons jamming and me trying to unjam them in the middle of fights. I recall, you know, close calls where I wound up ducking or dipping or getting knocked down into the turret. Stuff like that. That's what I recall. I don't recall thinking like, oh man, I'm getting shot at right now. Like I could die or something. Like, in fact, that thought never crossed my mind. In fact, you know, in my mind, I just assumed every time I was gonna make it. Like, I feel like you get 2 choices. Like, you can either say like, I'm fucked either way. So what, you know, I'm dead, I guess is what you do. Or you say, I'm invincible until I'm not, you know, like, and I just went with the invincible route. And that bullet going past my head, normally I would think that would make somebody scared, but it made me say like, oh, I'm so lucky. I'm just so lucky. I've got a little bubble around me, you know, I won't get hit, you know.
Did that hold all the way through your 10-month deployment?
So I got another really close call right at the end, literally in June. I think it was right after I think our sister platoon hit that IED. It was either right after or right before. We were going to Fob Blessing, which is all the way deep in Kunar down the Pesh Valley. And we went past the A Huskies where we would normally take contact. And it was hot, so hot. I decided I was going to sit up out of the turret a little ways to try and catch some air. And we went around this switchback on this little tight road, and an RPG came in. Wham! Like, it hit right front side, close enough that it knocked me out of the turret. Like, it knocked me down. it is just so sudden. Like there was no time. Like it was I think they shot it from like 100 meters away, super close. So like just people talk about hearing them or whatever, but I don't recall hearing shit. I just remember it instantly exploding right to the right front side and me going down. I remember the guy in the back seat yelling that I'm down or I'm hit. And then the other guy being like, I think I had the lieutenant in my truck, and he's like, what? He's like freaking. And then I remember being like, no, 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 I'm good, and getting up and becoming a part of that fight. That fight actually wound up being quite that, another interesting part of it. So that wound up lasting a long time. I think that was like a 2-hour gunfight. I was told, I don't know this for a fact. I wasn't in I'm not in the talk, but I feel like I was told that we had ran into a group of guys who had just crossed from Pakistan, and they were working their way to Korangal, and they were crossing the Pesh when we were driving through, and they thought we were there to intercept them. So they decided to intercept us because they had like half their guys on this side, half on this side, or some distribution. But we were taking fire from like three sides would be the way to describe it. And we were calling in 120s, we were calling in 155s, and an F-15 flew over, dropping 500 pounders. So yeah, that was a pretty big fight. Not as big as Gushlak though. Gushlak was even bigger than that.
Well, I want to hear about that one. Yeah, that's the story that I got the RPG and the IED confused. Yeah, and also it's kind of an illustration of how Iraq and Afghanistan can get mixed up in people's minds. It's Iraq where a lot of times the IED goes off, then the firefight. In Afghanistan, it's more the RPG. They were
a little more. I think it was part of their. I was told that it's like it comes from like their old school Mujahideen thing. That like some of those guys think that using IEDs is like cowardly or like beneath you. They don't like it. I mean, I don't think that they. I don't hold it against anyone. If I was fighting a superior power, I too would do the same thing. So wow. I don't hold it against them at all. But yeah, I just think that's why. Or it also could have been my experience, just that we had a really good route clearance team. So I didn't see as many, or that's why we didn't get so many initiated ambushes from that. They were forced to do it a different way because the IEDs were getting cleared.
Well, and you mentioned when the Soviets were in Afghanistan, and I remember watching documentaries of now the American journalists are with the Mujahideen, and so you see this Soviet convoy going through, and it seems like the Mujahideen are always up in the mountains or they're up above shooting down at these Soviet convoys. There's a striking picture that I have of you held up in the Korangal Valley, right? You're on this road and you're surrounded by these hills.
Yep.
And is that I mean, is that where most of the fire is coming? Is most of the fire coming from above you, from these mountaintops, from these hilltops?
100%. Yeah. I mean, in fact, I cannot think of a time where we were taking fire from below us, where we were the ones with the height advantage. I don't think that ever happened. I think there were only 2 roads in the whole province. So, if you're going somewhere, you're taking one of these valleys, you're taking one of these roads to get there. And I mean, we didn't have the manpower to just like set up an outpost on the top of every ridge every 5 miles or something like that. That would be insane.
Yeah. What was your assessment of these guys as fighters, these Taliban types, whoever they were? I mean, obviously you take them seriously because they have weapons and they're shooting at you, but as fighters, in terms of tactics and so on, how seriously did you and the soldiers you were with take them as an adversary?
I mean, I take them seriously. I mean, I think, if you asked me when I was there, I would tell you that I was fighting a bunch of farmers with, rifles, and they don't stand a chance against us and all that. We had this really inflated, beat up, facade. You need that so you don't lose your mind, I think. That's the whole reason that exists. But otherwise, you'd just be scared shitless. You couldn't do anything, But afterwards, looking at it, I mean, their tactics were pretty good. I don't think their ambushes were, I mean, we took really, really accurate intense fire. I think they were doing a pretty good job. And I also think they were doing a pretty good job not being, fully destroyed or eliminated. I think, it seemed to me like we were never killing all of them, so like there was just always more. So some of them had to be surviving several engagements, somehow surviving us dropping just an ungodly amount of artillery, and they're still surviving. So.
A minute ago, you mentioned another combat situation. What was that one?
Gushalac. Oh, so I think Gushalac's 100% worth mentioning. Where we were doing one of those, some general staff for Bagram was there. We used to make jokes while we were there that our unit's job was to take guys who were on staff positions from Bagram or Jalalabad and then get them their combat badge. Like that was our job. They would come visit us, then we'd go drive them somewhere dangerous so that they could get shot at, and then we would leave so that they could get their badge and go back to their base.
Yeah.
That's not really what was going on, but that was a joke.
Sure.
And in this particular case, we had a big, I mean, this was a big movement for what we were doing. If I remember right, like First ID, which is who was our overseer, we all wore First ID combat badges. That's what we all did. But they sent like a platoon of guys in up on the mountain to like of where we were going. And then we had a Marine embedded training team with us. We had like a company of Afghan army, and then like, man, I want to say like 12 American trucks or something too. This was like a full movement into there. And this is way out in the middle of nowhere, like really, really far past Fob Blessing into the boonies. And yeah, we turned and it's on a little switch. There's a river on one side, and you come in like this, and that puts mountains on all four sides here. And right when you get into there, we're pulling in, and there is no one. There's no people anywhere. There's not a single person in this whole village.
Oh,
that's a bad sign.
So that's a sign that the locals know what's going on.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They all are already aware, and we became aware also immediately that we were going to take contact. And we were briefed before we went on that. I mean, it was black. It was considered like contact is guaranteed. So, we were supposed to have a Spectre gunship for that. We were supposed to have an AC-130 Spectre gunship, but it got called off to go help in the Korengal last minute. And this is like some brigadier general's order, like that no one goes to this place without a Spectre. But they radioed down and said, no, you guys are going in. So we went in with no Spectre gunship. And yeah, I'd say the guys got out, they dismounted, they walked into the town. And when they reached their farthest point, full ambush. I mean, and at them, of course, at the dismounted patrol first. I mean, it was very intense. Me and another guy, I remember like hitting a mud hut up on one of the hills, like blowing it to bits with a Mark 19. Like they were in crevices of these rocks. I just felt like they were everywhere. Like I could see them running like up through the cracks, trying to get up over the hill once we started getting close. That's where I feel like I saw more than anything else. And we were there so long that Kiowa attack helicopter, they're not really attack helicopters. The little Kiowas, the little birds, they have like two pilots, a little bubble in the front. They showed up first on station because this was like a radio for like any air, like all air support, anything we can get. And those guys were crazy. I mean, they dumped all their ammo real close. I mean, they flew right up to the edge of these mountains and they're like engaging. And when they ran out, I saw them throwing hand grenades out the helicopter down on the ground. Then when they were like, oh, we're out, next, like an F-15 or a pair of F-15s showed up and they started dropping 500 pounders. And then, because we were outside artillery, I should have said this, we were not in artillery range. We could not get help from the 155s. It was not possible. So, yeah, so it was like all hands on deck. And when we were leaving, you know, when you go to leave, you do a head count, make sure everybody's there. And we did the head count and we were missing a guy. So we're like, oh shit, you know, somebody is dead or something, and we don't know where they're at. But we're not gonna leave till we find them. So we wound up stuck in there looking for this dude. And he turned out it was one of those general staff guys. He's laying in a ditch, like just head down, not hit, just cowering and not getting up to look. So like we're like grab him up. Oh, I forgot when they're running back too. I see my team leaders running, and I'm looking over to my left. I see him running while I'm shooting, and he just whap. He just face plants. Just he got hit. I mean, he's for sure got hit. Like that was for sure what happened. I thought he's dead, like because he just went straight down. You know, like he got hit in the head or something. And but he didn't. He started screaming or whatever. I don't know who it was. Somebody grabbed him by his IBA, by his body armor, and drug him all the way to the truck, put him in the back. The bullet hit his Gerber tool, hit his Gerber on his belt, and ricocheted into his side plate. And I forgot this too, that morning, Sergeant Crowley, our squad leader, said, you guys are all putting your side plates in. Because when we weren't wearing them, they weigh 7 pounds each. So we were like, hell no, we ain't wearing the side plates. What are the odds we're going to get hit in this little square, you know, right here? Well, he got hit right there.
Wow.
You know, if that wouldn't have been on him, I would have went right into his liver or whatever. It would have been no good.
So one of the questions is, you know, and this comes up in Vietnam too, when you're fighting the Viet Cong, not so much the North Vietnamese, when you're fighting the Viet Cong. On the American side, you got tanks, you're talking about the F-15s, you're talking about the Kiowa Helos, you're talking about the AC-130s, this incredible technology that has come all the way from the United States, right, to Afghanistan. And up against you, you got, just to go with, you know, the lingo you hear, dudes in man dresses who live in caves, you know. Do you think, you know, you're talking about these guys who are, you know, whatever else they are, they're incredibly tenacious.
Yeah.
You know, here are people who are living lives that most Americans just, I mean, the overwhelming majority of Americans cannot comprehend, just from the American perspective, just the basic difficulty of their lives, you know.
Yep.
They've got rudimentary weapons. You guys got the AC-130s, you've got the Kiowa Helos, you've got the tanks. I don't know if these folks are sitting around talking about nationalism, because I don't think there's a conception of the nation of Afghanistan for these folks. I don't think it's a nationalist thing. I mean, I understand you're not an anthropologist, but did you ever pick up any sense, like what's motivating these folks to fight, rather than saying, hey, these folks, they want to bring schools, they want to bring hospitals. Let's go with that. Schools and hospitals are good. Instead of doing that, they're like, no, we're going to blow up the schools and the hospitals, and we're going to fight these folks until they eventually leave. Well, like what's I don't know if you have any sense of it at all, but what's motivating these folks to be so tenacious in this fight?
Well, first of all, I would say that, like you said, I'm not qualified really to answer this question. It's not my field of study.
Just kind of based on the vibes you picked up when you were there.
Yeah, based on my personal experience, I would say that I think they want to be autonomous. And this went from village to village, really, up there. Like a lot of these villages that were out in the Kunar, like I don't even think they'd seen another person other than people from the village right next to them for 20 years, you know? Like, so they don't really want to be nationalized. And it kind of makes sense. They're so disconnected. They don't have internet. They don't have road systems that are you know, they don't all have vehicles, although, the only thing you ever see is a white Toyota Corolla. And, everyone's got a white Toyota Corolla, an AK-47, and a cell phone. Like that was what they all had.
Yeah. Yeah. So even it sounds like what you're saying is this idea of building a nation is something that's actually foreign to a lot of the people who live in the country that we call Afghanistan. They don't have a conception of a nation called Afghanistan. They have a conception of their little world, which is based on their area, their tribe, their region. Right.
Well, it makes sense too, because, there, and just like it would be here if it were the case, but it's not, most of them are spending their day trying to figure out how to eat. Like their day every day is wake up, how do I get food? How do I get water to make it to the next day? Or if winter's coming, how am I going to get warm enough clothing or whatever my family needs to make it through the winter? Most Americans and most first world country people are not worrying about that. You're not waking up saying, how am I going to eat today? You're waking up being like, man, I got to go to work and I got to deal with this problem. I got to deal with, that's why we call them first world problems.
Right.
And I think that drives a lot of that, but they don't have time to want to be nationalized. And there's nothing really in their mind that a national government can offer them, other than empty promises, like that. So, and frankly, I saw a ton of corruption even when we were there in the local government. So it's not surprising that they don't want to have any part of it. They don't want to be a part of that. I 100% support, taking out Al Qaeda, destroying the network, reducing their ability to strike targets, in the Western Hemisphere. Seems really good to me. I'm 100% behind that. I'm not sure that it required a 20-year invasion of the whole country to achieve that goal.
I hear that. I think there's general agreement Al Qaeda needed to be dealt with. But this idea of nation building in a country where there's not really much of a conception of a nation,
Yeah,
that's an interesting. I just have a couple more questions for you.
sure.
And of the two questions, the second one has to do with difficulties you and your fellow soldiers had, coming home,
Sure.
sort of the war after the war. But the question preceding that is that a lot of times combat vets will say, combat is a terrible thing. What it does to people, obviously those who are the families of those who are killed, those who are wounded, those who experience it, it's a terrible thing. But there's also something about it. You'll hear this 50 years later from Vietnam vets. They'll say there's also something about it though that you miss. And even 50 years later, although I hated every minute I was in Vietnam, still there's something about combat. I just have to admit it that I miss, right? Now I've heard that a lot from combat vets. Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think I go through phases all the time, or I did a lot, especially right after I came home. It's a little bit old now. I'm getting older and wiser, I think.
Yeah.
But it's the adrenaline rush. It's that when everything matters right then.
Mm.
Nothing's more on the line than it's ever been. It is full life or death. You guys are fighting, and there's a chance you can actually die, and you can see it. Like you can see it happening around you. So it's not, it's not like a aneurysm or a heart attack. You're not going to see that coming. You're just going to have it. But this is like you are very aware of all. Like I can see where the bullets are skipping across the ground, and I can hear them snapping as they go past my head. Like it's very intense.
I'm interested in hearing about that early re-entry into civilian world, where all of a sudden now, these really basic life and death, fundamentally important questions aren't on the front burner anymore. Now it's more like, oatmeal or pancakes is the decision of the morning, that kind of thing. How does that go? And since then, I mean, how has it gone as you've kind of been now in this civilian culture with this combat experience behind you?
So coming home was very interesting. Obviously, we were all thrilled to come home, and I think for a couple months it was great. We were having a great time, drinking a lot and partying and seeing everybody. And then, it kind of wears off. And now what do you do? Where do you go? And I felt like there just was not a lot of direction. I don't think we do a great job, bringing guys back, specifically in Guard or Reserve units, because you bring us back and then everyone gets separated and split apart. At least in the active duty units, these guys come back and they're still together. they still are, you know, training together, they're still working together. Whereas we came back and okay, you guys you're done until the next, you know, until 3 years later when you get called up again. You know,
Mm.
and I really think it affected me, and I think it affected my Tingley, I think a lot too. I think I have a theory that the younger guys are more susceptible to like the emotional stress. And also, I think that there's a lot more pressure on the younger guys to like feel like they have to perform and do well because they've got something to prove to the older guys that they're with or whatever. And so I think then when you come back, I think it takes a pretty big toll on your mind. And then I, on top of it, you know, spent a lot of time in philosophy. And then I also started digging where I probably shouldn't have, where I started looking into why we were doing what we were doing in Afghanistan, why we're doing what we're doing in Iraq, how we're dealing with it, how some of the people are being treated. And of course, then I start to question, you know, whether what I did was a good thing or a bad thing, you know, and that's not good for your mind. You know, like it's really not good for your mind. And then it starts to make you feel like, you know, like imagine if you really did just believe that, you know, you're not killing Al Qaeda. You're just killing like people who live there. It's their land and they live there, and they don't want you to leave, and you're not leaving, so they're shooting at you, and then you're killing them for it. Like, that's probably that's like a is that okay? Am I supposed to live with that? Be fine with that? You know, it's just it really I think it can mess with you, and then you know I think it messes with some guys so bad that, you know, I think we're all very well aware now. I think that VA and everyone's done a good job letting everybody know about the, you know, 22 a day or 21 a day. I think I think it gets to people, you know, I think it gets to them over time.
22 or 21 veterans a day who are committing suicide.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think we do a good job when we bring guys back. I wish that when they brought us back, there was like a 6-month period where they had put us in like a training thing or something. I get that would cost money, like don't get me wrong, but like how much more money are we spending on mental health programs and stuff? Or if you just like kept the guys on like an active duty program for 6 months and I don't know, trained them all to do HVAC stuff or something like that. It could be anything really, but just to get them out of thinking that their job full time is, you know, carrying a gun around. Like I think we do a lot.
I mean, how are you able to flesh that out a little bit? I mean, did it affect you? You know, just a common thing you hear combat vets say that, you know, they don't like being in crowds. If they're in a restaurant, they have to have their back to everybody.
Yep.
You know, so there's that. Dreams. I mean, how did this stuff begin to come at you, or how did it come at you?
I think the first thing for me was a few months after I came home, I started having dreams, really weird dreams, stuff that didn't even happen. I mean, like stuff that didn't happen where like I'm left by myself, you know, from it being inserted and like, but the stress is real. And because I've been shot at, because I've been so close, like I feel it the whole time. Then I wake up with all that stress and I don't sleep a lot. Even to this day, I sleep 4 or 5 hours a night. And that's not because I want to sleep 4 or 5 hours a night. I just don't sleep good anymore. I used to sleep great. My mom would tell you that I was impossible to get out of bed, but not anymore. Now I sleep 4 or 5 hours. Definitely the crowds can be a problem. I hated for a while the fireworks or any, like if I didn't know they were coming, like if I knew a firework was coming, it's one thing, but like if you were behind me and set off a big firework, like a mortar or whatever, oh my God, that would, you know, I feel it all instantly. Like I think something's about, I need to be doing something, something's going to happen. And then I think the biggest thing even today now that I still deal with is hypervigilance, where I am walking around with my head on a swivel, looking at everything. I see everything when I'm walking around. If you think that I don't see you and I'm in your presence, I see it. You know, that's stressful too. Like just the constantly feeling, and I don't want to do it. I just can't really break that habit.
It burns a lot of energy, right? It burns a lot of mental energy, burns a lot of physical energy.
Yep.
A few minutes ago, you mentioned the name Tingley. So I don't want to pry, but I don't know if you're willing to share anything about tingly or not?
I mean, I think it's important to like he's the youngest guy in our group. And when we came back, I think I spent a lot of time with him when he came back. And me and him actually, we would play video games. Even he lived in a few towns over, so we weren't right beside each other all the time, but we would play video games at least every night for a couple hours if we weren't together doing something in person. And so I knew how he was feeling about it and everything. And I think it made him a little more reckless than people should be. I think I don't think he felt good about everything, you know. And I wish I would have realized at the time I was not so in tune with everything. I was still in denial about a lot of stuff. So I wish I would have known. I wish I would have known to like try and be there more. And then before it's too late because an accident happens and he dies. And then the whole he died accidentally after we came home. And the whole platoon, I think that really, that I feel like that's the last time we were all really together was at his funeral. And so it was really jacked up because my platoon we did not get anybody killed in action, which was, I think we were the first unit in that job that didn't. And we were all very proud of that. I mean, that's like that's the main goal, is to get everybody home alive. And we were so proud of that. And then it's like, it didn't matter that we did that because the youngest guy, our youngest dude, dies. Like, I feel like that was super sobering. I feel like that moment almost messed with me more mentally than the combat.
You said that, I think you used the word reckless. You often hear guys say that they, in one way or another, you mentioned adrenaline earlier in combat, and you come home and do things to try to get that adrenaline rush again. Do you think that might have been kind of what was going on?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's that you hear other guys getting motorcycles driving around really fast.
Yeah.
Skydiving, gambling's a really big one. I picked up poker. I still gamble. Like, that's where I get mine from. Granted, poker is a good one because you can get better at that. It's not pure gambling.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you see, what's interesting is all the time I have spent at poker tables, I see a lot of it. I mean, it's a solid 60%, I feel like, are just veterans.
Wow.
So there's probably something to that. There's probably a need for that in some way, shape, or form, and very few healthy outlets.
Yeah.
I'm just one guy. I'm just an average infantry dude. And there were a lot of guys like me that did stuff. There are a lot of other guys too that, had bad things like that happen who aren't seen. And I wish that I hope that they're able to get their stories out so other people could hear it. It would be good if we could avoid fighting wars. I think that they forget. I think it's a shame that we're losing. I mean, it's going to happen eventually, but all our World War II vets are dying. And they're the last guys to really remember a global conflict. And I think right now there are a lot of countries flirting, including the United States, flirting with the idea of another global conflict. And I wish people would hear the stories from the other guys who've seen it and do everything to prevent it, to stop it.
Yeah, I hear you. I do hope that other veterans of the Afghanistan conflict will hear what you say and will be encouraged to share their stories. I know that where they are in life, they're going to school, they're getting on with their careers and so on. But I hope they'll take the time to follow your example. I really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time, and to share these memories.